Hello guys, Fourfinger here, and with Path of Exile 2 coming out tonight, I thought this was a perfect time to talk about how the damage works in PoE and how you can build your character around it. Now we do have some changes, and I did make a simple example of how you can follow and then adapt it to your own build. We no longer have added flat damage in the game besides Firewall and maybe a few other things that I've seen, but I think overall they wanted to remove all the flat and effectiveness because it was just an extra layer of multipliers that made balancing a bit harder. So in PoE 1, you had some fast hitting abilities like Ball Lightning, which hits like maybe 5 times a second, and then you have ability which hits only 1 time a second. So if you get like 10 added damage on top of that ability, the one that hits 5 times faster gets 5 times more damage from it. So in order to balance that out, they kind of they put effectiveness which scaled that amount to make it more fair. Hopefully that makes sense, but since this is no longer in the game, you don't have to worry about it, so that's fine. Now when it comes to how you deal with the damage, you have increases and more types of damage. Now basically everything is multipliers, it's just the ones that come from increases are first combined together with a sum, meaning 1 plus second plus third plus fourth, how many you have, and then you just use that and multiply the base or what you already had before. So let me give you an example. If you have a 40.7 base, and then we get 100% increased damage, because we already have had 100% from the base, and we had 100% increase, that becomes efficiently 200%, which is multiplier of 2. So we have 40.7 times 2, so it's 81.4. Now let's say you put 3 support gems. Support gem 1 gives you 50% more area damage, support gem 2 cold damage, and then maybe support gem 3 gives you elemental damage just for the sake of argument. It's pretty much going to use a 1.5 multiplier for each of those, because again, you're multiplying the base that we already had and adding 50% on top of it, which becomes 1.5. Only difference is, as you can see it, we do not add those together, we just multiply it. So only increased damage gets added together before multiplying the base, if that makes sense to you. Now next part is cast speed. That's just another multiplier that has like its own base and its own scaling, but we don't care about the base because if we have 100% increased attack speed, we know our damage is going to double. And then in this example, let me just show you, let's remove 25% cast speed, 25 from the cold skills, and 50 more. So right now our damage doubles. And then if you do 50% more cast speed, because we added again 100% to base, we have 200% times 50, we actually get 300% now, which efficiently becomes 3 times the multiplier. So 2 times 1.5, that effectively becomes 3. Now next part is critical strikes, and easiest way to explain critical strikes is like, imagine you have like a pie, and then one part of the pie is your chance to crit, another part is your chance not to crit. So if you do not crit, nothing happens, but if you do crit, that stuff gets multiplied by your critical strike multiplier. Now in PoE 2 we have, from what I've seen, bonuses, but I think that's the same thing, it's probably gonna work the same way, and if not, it's probably gonna follow the same formula of increases then mores. But let me show you how it works in PoE 1. So in our case, we have a skill that has a base of 6% crit. If you're using attacks, you might have a weapon with certain amount of base crit. Then we have the increases, same like before. 50% increased, 100% increased, 50% increased, and 3% increased. So we're gonna take all of those, add them together, and then multiply the base. And then on top of it, we have a 10% more critical strike chance, which is also gonna be 1.1 multiplier, as you can see here. Now the problem, like I said before, this is our build, and we get up to 20% crit chance. So that first part of the pie where you don't crit is 1 minus 0.2, which is effectively 80% chance not to crit. And then second part is 0.2 chance to crit, that's 20%, that we multiply by our global critical strike multiplier, which you can see here. So effectively, after we add them together, we get to 1.3, because first part is 0.8 plus 0.2 times 2.5, you get to 1.3. I hope this makes sense to you. So like I said again, just imagine you have one part, and if it doesn't crit, you don't do anything with it. But if it does crit, then you multiply it by the multiplier, and you add those together. So in our case, we had 80% chance not to crit, so we leave at 80%. But when we do crit, we have 20%, and when that 20% becomes 50%, right? So we add 50% on top of the 80%, and you have 130%. So that's averagely 1.3 multiplier for your entire damage. I hope that makes sense to everyone. Maybe I didn't explain it the best, but yeah. Now, after critical strikes, we have something called monster resistance, and basically the way this works, any way you remove resistance from monsters, whether it be with penetration or with stuff like exposures and curses, the more resistance the monster have, the more penetrating those resistances becomes useful. So let me give you an example. Let's open another notepad. Let's say you hit for 100, right? And the monster has 50% resistance. Now your damage gets halved because 50% resistance is basically 0.5 multiplier, and you have pretty much halved your. Sorry, I actually hit my mic. You only have half the damage now. But if you have like 25% pen, then that 50% resistance becomes 25 resistance, and then your damage becomes 75. So which effectively means if you only take 25% penetration or any other source to remove the resistance, like I said, curses or exposures, your damage increases by 50%. Because if you go from 50 to 75, that's a 50% damage increase. Now if you get 25% more pen and get monster resistance down to 0, now you hit for 100 again, but this is effectively only 33% increase. So you can see like the more resistance the monster has, the more value you get out of penetrating or removing it, all the way until you reach 0. Now after you do reach 0, penetration no longer works. In PoE 2, in PoE 1 it did, but now only removing resistances with curses and exposures can actually get it to negatives. And if you do get it to negatives, let's say you get it to like minus 20%, but keep in mind, if you do this, your penetrations are useless. You have 100, and because now it's minus 20, you're just going to use it as a multiplier. So it's going to be 100 times 1.2, which is going to make your damage be 120. So hopefully this also makes sense to you. Overall, this should be fairly simple. So if we add all of those together, and we had 40.7 from base, then times increases 0.2, then times or the support gems that we had, times the cast speed, and then finally times critical, and then depending if the monster has resistance or not. So let me show you here. I put on purpose 50 cold res. If we don't have penetration, our damage is going to halve. If we add 25, as you can see, it's going to get increased by 50%. And if you get to 50%, it's pretty much going to get 33% more increase, like I said before. So overall, pen and resistance removal is really useful in PoE. So in PoE 1, you just want to build a lot of flats, then add a lot of increase, and then scale of that with multipliers such as more and crit and cast speed and all of that. Now in PoE 2, you just no longer have flat, but everything else seems pretty similar to how it was. So yeah, if you do take that damage and we take the calculator and we actually like show you how it works, you will get the same stuff. So basically, as you can see, it gets to 1k71 because there's also rounding in PoE. As you can see here, it's pretty much the same thing, but that's overall how the damage works. If you guys have any other questions or if you're unsure how certain stuff scales, you can ask in the comment section. I'll be more than happy to explain. But you also have a lot of other ways to scale damage, like for ignites you had effectiveness of added damage, you had all those other things depending on how the spell works. You had projectiles, so if you have projectile that can shotgun, if you add in a projectile, that's a straight up multiplier. There's a lot of ways to scale the damage, but hopefully this just gives you a like baseline idea. So just if you have increases, you just add them all together, and then on top of the base, whether it be attack speed or damage or whatever it is, and then you multiply it by all other multipliers. So that's pretty straightforward. Hopefully everybody understood me. If not, feel free to ask, and see you guys in the next one.